To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
So my dear children, in the earlier chapter we discussed about the origination of life in our earth. We discussed several theories related to the origin of life in our earth. And before that we discussed how does the earth has been created in the first place, right? We discussed about the nebula theory, the Big Bang theory. Then for the creation of life, we discussed about the cosmological theory, then the biochemical evolution, the theory of special creation, the spontaneous generation theory, and now we are going to discuss about the process of evolution. So in the earlier chapters, my dear children, we mainly focused about how does the organisms, the types of organisms, or how does organisms created within our earth, right? So there were different kinds of organisms that thrived on the earth, and we discussed that all of those organisms thrived on the earth mainly from one certain cell, the pre-cell, which was a bacterial cell, right? And that bacterial cell was the first and foremost living component that ever to occur in our earth, right? Then after that, through the branching of that particular cell, different other kinds of organisms were originated. Okay, so now my dear children, we'll be discussing about the evolution process. So you are given with the topic evolution. So what does this evolution means? What is the evolution? What kind of a thing or what kind of information that we can take from the evolution process? So you know that at the beginning of the lesson, I told you that humans have evolved mainly through apes. Apes were the first and foremost vertebrate, right? They were the first and foremost organism that had a vertebral column, right? During the evolution of human beings. Okay, they are the ones who have evolved in creation of modern human. So the process of which creating the modern human from primitive apes is simply called as the evolution of human beings. So in the same way, my dear children, right, it is given that various changes in the natural environment can have an impact on the existence of life. So various changes in the natural environment, can have an impact on the existence of life, right? So here it is given that various changes in the natural environment, that means the changes in the natural environment, my dear children, can change the lifestyle of different organisms. Okay, so changes in the natural environment can have an impact on the existence of life. Life's existence is confirmed by changes that occur gradually in living organisms in relation to continuous changes in the environment. Now it is given that life's existence is confirmed by, right? So existence of the life is confirmed by changes that occur gradually in living organisms in relation to continuous changes in the environment. So here it is given especially existence of the life. You know that life should exist within the environment. Within our earth, life should exist. I mean, now let's imagine like this. When change in the temperature, you know that it will definitely affect the organisms, the change in temperature. What will happen if the change in temperature, right? What will happen if the change in temperature will not be able to bear by the organisms? then what will happen? Definitely the organisms will die, right? Most of the organisms will die because that they can't, now they should have an ability to adapt for a particular environmental condition. If not, definitely they will die, right? Definitely they will die if they can't adapt. So during that climatic changes, my dear children, right? During those climatic changes, during the change of weather patterns, the animals who are living in the certain environment should have the ability to adapt and change their necessary factors that can fight against the climatic changes and which helps to survive. Okay, they should have to adapt. Otherwise, what will happen? Otherwise, the whole life forms will be eradicated from the earth, and my dear children, what will happen? The earth will be lifeless. So organisms should have the ability to adapt for a certain environment. So here it is given, the life's existence is confirmed by changes that occur gradually in living organisms in relation to continuous changes in the environment. So when change in the environment, organisms should also change in accordance to the environmental conditions. So that's how the evolutionary process actually happened. In the earlier times, right, I told you that aquatic organisms were plenty. So as there are plenty of aquatic organisms, what will happen? The competition for the favorable conditions is going to increase time by time. So at a certain time period, animals who are living on that particular aquatic region will not be able to survive because of that heavy competition. In that case, my dear children, one should definitely go for a different habitat. That's why the amphibians came into the land in the first place, because of heavy competition for the favorable conditions like food, water, and other resources. So amphibians landed on the earth, right? Amphibians landed on the terrestrial environments, and they conquered the terrestrial environment very well. Conquered in the sense they have adapted for the terrestrial environments, right? So that will help in creation of different organisms, and as well as these organisms will be fit enough to survive in that particular environment. So my dear children, when change in the environmental conditions, it's important to change the structures of the organisms as well. If not, life will not be able to continue. Then early simple living organisms on the earth have changed over time to become complex organisms. So like I said earlier, there was very simple organisms. Fish are very simple, no? You know that our heart has 4 chambers, 2 atria and 2 ventricles, but in a fish we can observe only 2 chambers, 1 atria and 1 ventricle, right? 1 atrium and a ventricle. So those guys are, or fish are, somewhat primitive. Primitive means not that much developed, not that much matured. Okay, so therefore my dear children, fish are considered as, right, they are considered as cold-blooded organisms. Cold-blooded in the sense they can't change the body temperature according to the, right, environment temperature, right? That means their body temperature is not constant. Environment temperature is going to change with the change of body temperature of the fish is going to change with the environment temperature. So that's a huge disadvantage for the survival. But when you come into vertebrates, right, especially vertebrate types like birds and mammals, those are the animals that evolved in the final stage. Even the reptiles and amphibians have the same features. Those organisms are cold-blooded organisms. That means they can't change the body temperature, right, according to their need. That means body temperature is not constant. When the environment temperature is going to fluctuate, their body temperature is also fluctuating. But mammals and birds are not like that. Their body temperature is constant. We have a constant body temperature of 37 degrees of Celsius. When changing the environment temperature, right, our body can maintain that particular temperature, my dear children. No matter whatever the environment temperature is, our body temperature remains at 37 degrees of Celsius. So that's a huge adaptation. So these adaptations came to us from the evolutionary process. Okay, time to time different changes are going to occur within the bodies of organisms. These structures or these special adaptations helps for the organisms to live in particular environment. Okay, so from a primitive organism, from a certain primitive organism, from a certain unicellular organism, unicellular bacterial cell, the humans and other types of vertebrates were created on the earth. However, the particular cell faced two different changes. So, my dear children, these changes occur for the survival, or these changes occur to provide a support for their survival. So, once again, the gradual development from, now you know that there is a gradual development, right? So the gradual development from simple organism, we all originated from a simple organism, right? So gradual development from simple organism to modern complex organism is called evolution. Now if you take the fish also, earlier fish types, right? Earlier fish type. So in the primitive earth, my dear children, the earlier fish types are not that much adapted to their environment like the fish in nowadays. Okay. So therefore, right, therefore we can see different structural changes within those organisms. Okay, within those organisms. So when you compare the fish in nowadays and when you compare with a fish or else an ancestor at the primitive earth, their body structures are way more different. It's mainly because of the adaptations. When that particular fish is going to develop from certain time period to time period, different adaptations are going to appear. And according to that adaptations, their body also is going to change, right? So those primitive fishes, right? Those primitive fishes, my dear children, they have a different structure, but now these fishes have somewhat different structures. Okay, and there is a special cases like this. There can be some organisms who are in the same structure as in the previous ages. So these organisms are called as living fossils. We'll be studying about living fossils later with the lesson. Okay, it's because that these things are called as fossils, because living fossils, because these organisms are not been evolutionary developed. I mean, like, they haven't evolved. They haven't evolved, right? Their features are same as the organism who was found at the primitive earth conditions. So therefore, my dear children, these organisms are not evolved well. So that's why these organisms are called as living fossils. We'll be studying about those things in the later part of the lesson. However, my dear children, usually, normally, each and every organism is getting developed from a simpler organism to a modern complex organism, right? That's the usual nature. That's how the nature works. That's how the life is going to work. Gradually, there are certain developments. And these developments that occur not within a short time period, within a long time period, my dear children, is called as the process of evolution. So here, Gradual development from simple organism to modern complex organism is called evolution. This is the one which is called as evolution. Okay, development of modern complex organism from a simpler organism in the past, okay, is referred as the process of evolution. Right then, various evidences are considered when drawing conclusions about evolution. So we can provide different evidences, right, so that to prove the animals or a particular organism evolved from a previous organism, from a previous immature organism, right? We can provide several information, several evidences to prove that condition, that modern organisms were developed from earlier organisms. Okay, we can provide several evidences to prove that statement. So these are those examples or evidences. Number one, evidences from geographical animal distribution. It is given as biogeography, right? So when you take the geographical animal distribution, we can get several ideas about the evolutionary process. Okay, we can get the several ideas about evolution process by checking the animal distribution. Okay, then evidences from comparative anatomy. So when you take the comparative anatomy of the organisms, that means when you check their structures, internal body structures, when you check those internal body structures from organism to one organism, we can get a certain idea about their internal anatomies, right? So by that way, we can observe the similarities. So by observing those similarities, we can say that modern organisms developed from previous organisms or earlier organisms. Okay. Then next one, evidences from fossil study, paleontology. So from fossils also, fossils are the ones that are buried under soil or in any kind of a place, right? So these buried things can be structures of organisms, structures like skeletons, teeth, hair, or any other body part like feathers, legs, anything. Okay, sometimes footprints, okay, and skin, and all other types of things can be considered as, but it should be originated from an organism. Okay, any kind of a part, any kind of a any kind of a thing related to a certain organism can be considered as a fossil. But however, it should be older, much older, right? A buried one, or else a deposited one on a certain mud or on a certain muddy soil or any other location. Okay, this kind of a thing is called as a fossil. So they should have a history, a long history. I mean, like, they should be very much older. So by that way only we can consider that thing as a fossil. Okay, so older bones or any other animal structures of organisms, right? Older structures of organisms can be considered as fossils. So by observing these fossils also, we can get a certain idea that modern organisms have evolved from the previous organisms who lived on the earth. Okay, so by studying these areas, my dear children, we can give certain evidences to prove that evolutionary process is true. Evolutionary process states that modern organisms created from earlier, right, immature organisms, right? Okay, then fossil records show detailed evidences about the changes in living organisms. So when you check the fossil records, my dear children, right, when you check the fossil records, then we can get a sound idea and we can get a clear picture that modern organisms developed from the early organisms. right? By doing the fossil study, we can directly combine the older organisms with the modern organisms by doing the fossil studying. But however, I need to tell you this, that doing fossil study is not available for each and every organism. Okay, fossil study is not available for each and every organism. We are talking about millions of years. So within these millions of years, there can be different kinds of organisms which have been evolved. Okay, so for an example, I told you that cnidarians, arthropods and annelids were the first multicellular organisms to thrive on the earth. After that, fish were developed, then the amphibians, then reptiles, then birds, and finally mammals. So when studying about the mammal, we need to find out the fossil records of amphibians, reptiles, fishes, and so on. So we are talking about millions of years now. Organisms who lived within millions of time period. So we won't be able to get the fossil records of each and every organism. Okay, we won't be able to get fossil records of each and every organism. So by looking at the fossils that we can find, we will be able to provide information up to a certain extent. If the process of evolution, right, if the process of evolution is a book, then my dear children, we will be able to complete only certain number of pages, right, when completing the book. Sometimes start will not be there. Sometimes the end will not be there. Okay. Sometimes start and end is there, but the mid pages are missing. So if you assume that the evolutionary process of a certain organism is a book, then we will be able to complete only certain number of pages in that book. We won't be able to complete all the pages on the book. There are some certain organisms that we can find out from the fossil study, we can, all pages contained within the book is been already completed, right? There can be certain organisms. But however, for the most of organisms, the evolutionary process will be a blank. For the most of organisms, blank means mid pages will not be available for you, because we will not be able to find out fossils for each and every type of organism from the earlier time to modern era. Okay, so evolutionary process is like a theory. That theory is not being completed 100% yet. This theory is not completed 100% yet due to lack of fossil studies or due to lack of fossils. Okay, right then. So fossil records show detailed evidences about the changes in living organisms, but by studying the fossils that we have or that we can find, my dear children, we can get a certain idea, and we can say that the changes in living organisms happened. The modern changes in living organisms happened because of the primitive organisms who were earlier living on our earth. Okay, right then. So the fossils. Preserved plant and animal parts are found during various excavations. A fossil is the preserved remains of an organism, a part of an organism, or traces or trace. It can be footprints, prints on a shell of a dead organism. Such types of fossils are found in rocks, ice, peat bogs, volcanic ash, and in mud. So fossil, like I said, it is a residue of a certain organism, a remain of a certain organism. It can be a part of a certain organism or the entire organisms, or sometimes footprints or any other structures, right? Like shells or they are body skeletons, anything. Okay, but however, these things should be somewhat older, right? These things should be somewhat older. So if that's so, these things are considered as fossils. So fossils are in simple remains of organisms, right? Residues of organisms that were deposited or that were deposited within different kinds of locations. Okay, so this is what do you mean by a fossil. So we can find fossils in these places, my dear children. The specialty here is that these are preserved or conserved, right? These bodies or structures or these prints have been preserved within the structure. That is why it is specially called as a fossil. So a preserved animal remain of an organism can be considered as a fossil. So fossils can be found like this. A part of an organism who is preserved can be considered as a fossil. Then tracers, small tracers or strays like footprints, prints on shell can be considered as a fossil. Then these fossils are found within the rocks, my dear children. Like these rocks, the imprints can be observed. Sometimes within the ice, right? Sometimes within the ice, right? Then peat bogs and volcanic ash, and also in mud, you can identify these things. Okay, so these are the fossils. So as you can see here, within the first figure, you are given with a type of a fossil. So here you can observe there is an insect who is trapped within a certain type of a rock-like thing. Actually, this is not a rock. This is type of a glue, a resin given out from a tree, right? So this animal is stuck on that particular glue given out by the tree. Then here, in this one, my dear children, we can observe it is very clear to us that this imprint is on the particular rock over here, and in here also it is on the rock, and here also it is placed on a rock, right? So these imprints or else bodies which are being preserved for a long time period are considered as fossils, right? These are considered as fossils. Right then, harder part of an animal. Now we are going to discuss what are the examples for fossils right now. Okay, examples for fossils, right? What are the things that can be considered as fossils? So first one given, harder part of an animal such as a skeleton, teeth or shells. As the part of a bone gets slowly decomposed, sludge mud seeps into pores of the bone. Then bone is subjected to high pressure and turns into a bony rock. This bony rock can be considered as a fossil. Now, the first type of creation in a fossil, right? Harder part of an animal, like the skeleton, that is the hardest part, right? Skeleton, when you take the skeleton, it is the hardest part of an animal. So harder part of an animal such as skeleton, teeth or shells, right? As the part of a bone gets slowly decomposed, sludge mud seeps into the pores of the bone. Now, when these bones are getting decomposed slowly, pores are going to appear, right? Smaller pores, right? Or holes are going to appear. Then sludge mud will seep into these pores or these holes. and gradually it will create a certain rock. Okay, so this rock will get hardened over the time, my dear children, and it will take the shape of the structure or the skeleton. So this rock can be considered as a fossil then. It can be considered as a fossil because it contains the structures of organisms, right? Or it is in the shape of the structures of organisms who lived in the prehistoric era, right? So here it is given, as the part of bone gets slowly decomposed, sludge mud seeps into the pores of the bone, then the bone is subjected to high pressure and it turns into a bony rock. Then it will turn into a bony rock. This bony rock can be considered then as a fossil. The creation of a fossil. The first way. When a certain animal is going to die, let's imagine that it is going to die and it's going to flood, right, with water. That body is going to flood with water. Then what will happen? When time is going to pass by, this body is going to deteriorate slowly, and also the bones will also get decomposed. So upon decomposing, smaller pores will get created within the bony structure and sludge mud will seep into those holes. When time is going to pass by, this sludge mud will turn into a rock due to high pressure, and this particular structure which is created to the shape of the skeleton using that rock can be considered as a fossil because it contains the parts of organism, a part of organism, right? Okay, then the second one. Some of the dead animals get deposited in the mud. Later, the animal get decayed and the decayed matter is removed as gas. The resulting cavity due to the absence of dead animal gets filled with materials such as silica, sand, and this fossil has the same shape of the original skeleton. Now the second one. Let's imagine that a certain type of a arthropod is going to die by trapping inside a certain rock or something. So when the time is going to pass by, that body is going to deteriorate or decay. Then, my dear children, sometimes it will, after the decomposition, these waste materials will be removed as a natural gas, as a biogas. These are the ones actually we referred as the biogas, right? So those things will remove to the environment as gases. But however, when these things are getting removed out, when these things are getting removed from the from interior part to the external environment, that particular interior part will be a cavity. So that cavity will be completely filled with, right, certain types of rocks or stones or sand or any other structure, and it will create a certain fossil kind of a skeleton, right? Skeleton or that particular shape is getting imprinted on the certain rock, right? So this rock can be considered as a fossil. This can be considered as a fossil, the second one. So animals get decayed and deposited in the mud. Later the animal is getting animal matter or the decayed material is getting removed as gas. Then the resulting cavity, right, the resulting cavity, right, due to the absence of dead animal will get filled with material such as silica, sand or rocks or any other thing, sometimes mud also. Then that structure will have the same shape as the animal, so therefore it can be considered as a fossil, right? It can be considered as a fossil because it has some traces of organisms. Okay, as it has several traces of the organisms, it can be considered as a fossil. Then the next one. The external skeleton of some insects are preserved in tree resins and are fossilized. So like I said in the earlier, amber is a good example for it. Okay, amber has a certain type of a glue, right? Amber has a certain type of a glue which is coming out from that particular plant. So let's imagine that an insect like a mosquito is going to come and or else a mosquito or else a butterfly, insect like a butterfly or else a mosquito or else a dragonfly is going to come and is going to lay down on the on that resin. So what will happen? It will get stuck on that resin and finally it will die. Then when the resin, the level of the resin is going to increase, it will totally cover with that resin part, right? And the animal will be preserved within that resin, within that glue. So that particular thing can be referred as a fossil then. Okay. Right. So this is the third example for a fossil, right? So what are the three examples, my dear children? Number one, harder part of an animal such as a skeleton, teeth or else a shell, right? Then some animals get decomposed within the mud and the cavity is getting filled with sand. Then that structure can be considered as a fossil. Then, my dear children, animals which are trapped within the tree resins can be considered as fossils. Then the next one, the preserved bodies of extinct animals such as mammoth are found within ice in the countries of polar region. So the next one is preserved bodies of extinct animals such as mammoth are found within ice in countries of polar region. Mammoth is an elephant-like creature who lived in the earlier stages of the earth, right? Mammoth. It has wool around the body. Unlike the elephant who are living in our normal environments, mammoth had wool within their body. It's like a bison, right? It's like a bison cow, right? So the normal cows that living in our environments, they don't have long hair, no, but the bison cow has long hair. In the same way, apart from the elephants that who are living in normal natural environments in nowadays, mammoth had wool around their body. It helped them to recover from or adapt. It is a special adaptation so that they can recover from extreme cold temperature that had during that time. Okay, it was a protective adaptation. But however, due to climatic changes, my dear children, mammoths were extinct. But still, their bodies can be observed within the ice of polar region. So these bodies can be considered as fossils. Okay. Mammoths were extinct mainly because of the changes of climate, right? Because of the changes of climate, mammoths were extinct, right? So as the dinosaurs. But however, dinosaurs were not extinct because of the climatic changes. Dinosaurs were extinct. It is assumed that the dinosaurs were extinct because of the asteroid collapse, right? An asteroid collapsed into Earth, right, millions of years back, and that's the main reason in wiping dinosaurs from the planet Earth. Okay, now they have been extinct. Mammoths were extinct because of the climatic changes mainly, and dinosaurs were extinct mainly because of a asteroid collision with the Earth. Okay, even though these organisms were extinct from the environment, there are some traces and bodies which are being preserved. Okay, So these fossils or these structures can be considered as fossils, my dear children. Sometimes their skeletons may get protected, sometimes entire bodies get collected, right? And sometimes their footprints can be clearly visible. You know that there were heavy, there were large dinosaurs living on the planet Earth, and when they are going to set foot on different places, their footprints, right, may preserve over the time. So these preserved footprints are also considered as fossils. Right then. So next one, like I said, the footprints of animals such as dinosaurs are preserved due to extreme environmental conditions, are considered as fossils. So these are the dinosaurs. So their body structures, as you can see, their body structures is way more larger than the normal organisms who are living in right now. So when they are going to walk, right, their footprints may store on different rocks or any other places, and these may get preserved over the time. So these preserved footprints of these organisms can be considered as a fossil. Okay, so these are the examples of fossils, my dear children. Examples for fossils. Okay, right then. So my dear children, we discussed several things related to the fossils in the earlier slides, right? So now I am going to show how to create a certain type of a fossil. Okay, how to create a fossil. So we discussed that fossil means a structure of a certain organism which is being preserved over the time. It can be any kind of a structure. It can be a skeleton, a shell, sometimes entire organism also. And even the traces like footprints can be taken as a fossil. So my dear children, we'll be creating a fossil within this activity. Okay. So it's very simple. But however, you'll be needing these materials in creation of a fossil. First of all, you'll be needing a block of clay, right? Clay, or else plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris means when a bone is, during certain types of injuries, sometimes a bone will crack, my dear children. In that case, a white color structure, a white color solid is going to wrap with a band-aid, right, around that particular region, especially with arms and legs. So that white color structure, that white color solid material that is wrapped with a band-aid is referred as the plaster of Paris. That solid white color material. Okay, solid white color material is referred as the plaster of Paris. Okay, it's like white color clay, right? So that is plaster of Paris. You can find, if you want, you can use clay or else that plaster of Paris in creation of this particular fossil. Then you'll be needing a yogurt cup. Right? Or else I'll mention as a cup because you can use a yogurt cup or else any other kind of a cup so that we can fill it with plaster of Paris. Okay, a cup. Then we'll be needing a spoon, right? Then a shell of an organism. Shell of an organism, right? Shell of an organism, a shell, right? Like this way, it can be a shell of a snail, shell of a bivalve or any, right? So like that way we need to find out a shell of a certain organism. Then a plant leaf. Plant leaf, right? And a scissor. A scissor. So these are the materials you need, my dear children. You'll be needing a cup, a spoon, and shell of an organism, and a plant leaf, and a pair of scissors. And to make the structure, we'll be needing clay or else plaster of Paris. So these are the materials that you need in creation of this certain fossil, my dear children. Now let's go to observe the method of creating a fossil. Right. So it is given here method. So there are several steps given, my dear children. It's very easy. Let's see. Fill half of a 1 yogurt cup with clay. Place the shell or the leaf on it and press. When the print of the shell and the leaf are marked on clay, remove the shell or the leaf. Now what do you have to do? First of all, you have to fill half of the yogurt cup or the cup with clay, right, or plaster of Paris. Then place the shell or the leaf on it and press. So you have to place the shell or the leaf on this particular cup which has the clay or the plaster of Paris, and you have to press it very well so that the print will get deposited on the clay or the plaster of Paris, right? When the print of the shell and the leaf are marked on the clay, remove the shell or the leaf. Now what do you have to do? When it is being printed very well on the clay or the plaster of Paris, you have to take away the shell, right? You have to take away the shell. Then the next one, put some plaster of Paris into other yogurt cup. So into another yogurt cup, you have to add some plaster of Paris. Then add some water and prepare a plaster. Carefully pour the prepared plaster or binder glue on the prints on the clay. Keep for about 2 hours to dry. Now what do you have to do? Now after doing that thing, my dear children, what do you have to do? You have to prepare a solution by using plaster of Paris or binder glue. Then what do you have to do? Then you have to add for that particular space that solution like this. Okay, so put some plaster of Paris into the other yogurt cup. To another cup, you can use another cup in here, right? And you have to add that solution, plaster of Paris solution, into the yogurt cup. Add some water and prepare a plaster. Carefully pour the prepared plaster or the binder glue onto the prints on the clay and keep for about 2 hours to dry. So if you don't have plaster of Paris, you can use binder glue. Okay, so what you have to do, for that imprint which was placed on the yogurt cup or the cup, you have to add binder glue and you have to keep it so that it will dry. Okay, then cut the yogurt cup with the scissors and take out the clay lump out of the plaster or binder glue. Observe the model fossil on the surface of the clay lump and the plaster made with plaster of Paris. Now what do you have to do? You have to take it out and you have to observe the structure of it. So you can remove the yogurt cup or the cup you can cut it by using the scissors and you can remove it. So after removing the yogurt cup, you can see the structure like this. As we took the imprint to the shape of the shell or to the shape of the plant leaf, it's very clear to us that the structure is like a shell. right? So the shell is considered as a fossil, my dear children. It's very easy to see that the shell or the structure can be considered as a fossil. Here the glue or the structure is in the shape of the shell. That is why it is called as a fossil. Okay. The same structure can be observed. That is why it is considered as a fossil, my dear children. So this is the way of making a fossil. Okay, it's very simple. What you have to do, you have to take clay or plaster of Paris, then you have to place that thing, right, that particular shell. You have to get an imprint, a good imprint. Then you have to put some binder glue, right, onto it, or else you can, if you want, you can put the plaster of Paris as well. Then you have to cut and remove the yogurt cup after drying out. So the part or the remainder will be a fossil, which is created to the shape of the shell or to the shape of the plant leaf. Right, my dear children. So this is the way of creating a fossil. Okay. So let's head on to the lab, my dear children, and let's prepare this system, or let's prepare this fossil, and we'll observe the fossil, my dear children. Okay, so let's head on to the laboratory and we'll observe the structure. Right, my dear children. So now I'm about to prepare a sample of a fossil. So here I have with me several samples which can be taken to prepare a fossil. So you have leaves, several shells, right, and like different colors of shells with different shapes. So what you have to do now, I have two identical yogurt cups with me also with some plaster of Paris. Okay, so let's keep this thing in a different position. So this is clay, my dear children. So we need to take a sample of clay first, and we need to fill like half of the first yogurt cup with clay. Right, like this. Like up to a half I'm going to fill with clay. Okay, so we go then. Like this, firmly you need to insert the clay like up to a half of the yogurt cup. Okay, so here it is. Now what you have to do, you have to take one of these shells. Okay, let's take one of these shells and we'll press this thing like this. And now when it has been imprinted, let's take the shell out. Gently, let's take the shell out. So it's like this. Like this, you can see the shape of it. See? Now let's keep it like this, and we'll take the other yogurt cup, and now I'm going to make the plaster. So this is plaster of Paris, my dear children. So we'll add several powder of plaster of Paris into it like this. And by adding water now, we need to prepare the plaster of Paris. Okay, So we need to add water. Remember, we need to mix it well. You have to make a plaster. Okay, now it's okay. Earlier it was somewhat, the liquid nature is somewhat more. So in that case, you have to add even more powder into it. Right. Now what you have to do, you have to take this thing and gently we need to insert this layer like this. So you'll be needing even more. So therefore I'm going to add all of these things. Let's add with water. Once again we'll mix. So I have prepared the liquid, my dear children. Now let's pour this thing into the solution. Right. Okay, now what you have to do, you have to keep this system, right? You have to keep the system so that it will so this is our system right now. So you have to keep this thing until it's going to dry out, and finally we need to cut off the yogurt cup and we'll observe the shape of the fossil after that. Okay, so let's keep it to dry somewhat. Right, so my dear children, now as you can see here, the plaster of Paris is being fixed firmly, right? So now we can cut off the yogurt cup and we'll see the structure of the fossil. So let's cut this off very gently. So I'm going to remove the clay layer. Right. So now you can observe the structure of the fossil to the same shape of the oyster shell. As you can see, to the same shape of the oyster shell, the structure could be observed. See? So it's very obvious to us that this is a sample for a good sample for a fossil. Okay, right then, my dear children. So this is how the fossils are going to create. So now let's head on to the classroom once again and we'll study the further things related to the lesson. So my dear children, I think you have observed the fossil very well. So you could see that the structure was similar to the structure, right? The same structure could be observed. So it's similar to this. Even I have given you the figure in here. It is very similar to this structure, right? So that is why it is called as a fossil, my dear children. It is very similar to the living organisms, structures of the living organisms. right? So our observation was quite simple, right? The similar to the shell, right? A structure similar to the shell could be observed. So we can write the observation. The structure created was the shape of the shell, right? The structure created was in the shape of the shell which used. So we can say above structure is considered as a fossil. So my dear children, this is the way of creating a fossil. So we have even observed this thing within our laboratory. So as you can see here, the same structure could be observed, right? Which has the shape of the shell that we have used. So therefore this structure can be used as it can be given as a fossil, right? So this is the way of creating a fossil, my dear children, right? Okay. So you are given with an assignment. Okay. You are given with an assignment. So within this assignment, what you have to do is you have to prepare an article to put up in the wallpaper under the following topics, right? So you have to prepare an article. So this article should have following topics. One of these following topics: origin of life, origin of universe, fossils, biodiversity. So these are the topics, right? These are the topics. So you have to prepare an article that contains at least one of these topics, my dear children. So you have identified, even you have learned even more things, right? Even more things other than the things given in your textbook, especially with the origin of life and the origin of universe. Okay, so what you have to do, my dear children, you have to prepare a booklet or else a certain article so that you can represent it in your school. Okay, so actually this topic is very interesting because you can find several information regarding these evolutionary processes and also with the origin of life and any other contents. So try to find out new details. Okay, you can find out these details especially from the internet, my dear children, right? If you use the internet, and you can find out these details, even like with several examples and with several pictures and illustrations, right? So you can use them, you can cut and paste them in your article as well, right? So I hope that you will follow up with this assignment and you will do it, right? I hope that you will do this article, or you will write down this article in providing several information regarding these topics, my dear children. Right then. So let's head on to see the next thing then. Next topic is given: living fossils. Living fossils. So we studied about the fossils, my dear children. And we discussed that fossils are mainly getting created because of the, right, fossils are mainly getting created because of the traces of certain organisms, because of parts, body structures of certain organisms. But however, within living fossils, my dear children, these organisms can be observed even for today, right? And these living fossils have not evolved well. I mean, their body structures are similar to the organisms who are living in primitive era. Okay, who are living in primitive era. So those organisms are pretty much older. Even though those organisms are older, much older, their body structures and their adaptations and other features have not changed with the time. During the process of evolution, we discussed that living fossils are created, right? Actually, living organisms are created, not fossils, living organisms, right? Living organisms are created from a simpler organism to a complex organism, right? When the time is going to pass by, my dear children, different changes should occur within the structure of organism. For a simple example, humans evolved, right? Humans evolved from apes. So apes were the ancestors of human. So living fossil means the ancestors are the ones who are living right now. For a certain example, let's take like this. Apes, if apes are living on the earth except for all the other humans, then it is going to be a living fossil. But however, it haven't happened, right? It hasn't happened yet, right? I mean, like, you know that apes have been developed into modern human beings, so therefore we won't be able to observe such a scenario, right? But for other types of organisms, there are certain types of organisms that the ancestor is still living. Means in the prehistoric era, the same organism were there. In nowadays also, the same organism is there. Their body haven't got changed. Evolution haven't happened for that particular organism. Such kind of an organism is the one who is referred as a living fossil, right? So in biological evolutionary process, there must be continuous changes in the bodies of the living organisms. But some organisms survive even today, retaining their physical properties unchanged, though millions years have passed. These non-evolved organisms are called living fossils. So living fossil is a non-evolved organism. These organisms have the similar bodies, similar structures from millions of years. Okay, in simple, organisms which do not show an evolutionary process or organisms which haven't evolved are referred as living fossils, my dear children. It means the ancestor is still living in the same structure. Okay, so that is why it is called as a living fossil, right? Living fossil. So there are no certain changes within their body structures. There are no certain changes within their body structures, my dear children. The same body structures can be observed till now from the past. Okay, so such kind of an organism is the one who is referred as the living fossil. Now let's head on to see what are the examples for living fossils. A fish named coelacanth, right? Coelacanth was discovered in the sea near South Africa in 1938. coelacanth was a fish who lived in prehistoric era. It is assumed that it was extinct. But suddenly in 1938, this fish is going to reappear near South Africa. Okay. So this fish was survived from those period to till now without going into any kind of a change. Okay. So coelacanth can be considered as a living fossil, my dear children, because their body structures is pretty much similar to the organism who was living in the prehistoric era. Okay. So here it is given. A fish named coelacanth was discovered in the sea near South Africa in 1938, which was believed to be extinct about 70 million years ago. So it is assumed that this fish was died or extinct about 70 million years ago. That means this organism is much older, 70 million years. I'm not saying that this organism lived for 70 million years, my dear children, okay? It's not like that. My idea is this particular species was there 70 million years back. Now they have reproduced till now for the modern, till the modern world, but still throughout their generations, their structures haven't changed at all. The body structure and all the other structures haven't changed at all. Okay. If you take humans 70 million years back or 5 million years back, humans were apes. Okay. Humans were apes. Humans were apes. Like 5 million years back, humans were apes, my dear children. Okay, there was no humans like this. But however, this fish was able to, this fish was able to maintain their same body structure till 70 million years. Okay. So therefore, this is referred as a living fossil. Even though 70 million years have been passed, my dear children, their body structures or the body structure of this particular animal haven't got changed. It haven't got evolved. So that is why it is considered as a living fossil. So it is given once again, the physical characteristics of this fish was found to be similar the fish found millions years ago. So like I said, before 70 million years, there was a coelacanth fish. Now, in 1938, they have found another coelacanth fish. When you check these shapes and, their structures, body structures, these body structures are similar. It is not the same organism. It's a different organism. It's not the same one. It's not the same particular fish. But however, species is the same. Okay. It is the same species, my dear children, with same characteristics. Okay. Right then. So here it is given the physical characteristics of the fish was found to be similar the fish found millions years ago. So that coelacanth fish is considered as a living fossil. Therefore, coelacanth fish is called as a living fossil, right? Coelacanth fish is a living fossil. It's because that their body structures haven't got changed. Even 70 million years been passed. Okay, that is why it is considered as a living fossil. Then the next one, Lingula, which is found around the Thambalangamua Bay in Trincomalee, is called a living fossil. Now there is a bay, Thambalangamua Bay, near the Trincomalee, right? Trincomalee Sea. Lingula, there's an organism called Lingula, right? And it is also a living fossil. Not only that, the dragonfly, cockroach, and lungfish are also considered as living fossils. So Lingula, this is special. This organism is found in Tambalangamu Bay near Trincomalee, right? Then dragonfly, cockroach, lungfish are considered as living fossils. So when you take the structures of lungfish, cockroach and dragonfly, right, these body structures haven't changed with the time. Even the millions of years have been passed, the same organism with same body structures could be observed millions of years back. That is why these things are called as living fossils, my dear children. Okay. Then, not only animals, the guinea otter, a tree fern, is also considered as a living plant fossil, right? So, guinea otter, this is a plant tree, right? A plant, also tree, and it is a fern type tree. Fern type tree. So this plant is also considered as a living fossil because at the earlier time also, like millions of years ago, this guinea otter plant were there, right? So these are the examples for living fossils, my dear children. So living fossils are the organisms who do not show significant evolutionary changes, right, within their body structures. So that is why these organisms are referred as living fossils. So living fossils are considered as the ones who are survived for a longer time period, for very much longer time period, like millions of years, without changing their body structures, my dear children. Normally, for each and every other types of organisms, normally when millions of years are going to pass by, organism is going to gradually change and it will take a different kind of a structure, and that particular structure is 100%, actually we can't say 100%, but up to a certain level being fit to the environment that organism is going to live on, right? But however, there are some certain organisms which they do not change over the time. I mean, like their body structures and other features and adaptations are not going to change over the time. So these organisms are the ones who are referred as living fossils. Okay, I'm not talking about a simple time period. I'm talking about huge time period like millions of years. Okay, through millions of years, if the structures and adaptations are not going to change in an organism, then that particular organism is referred as a living fossil. Okay, a living fossil. So examples for a living fossil is the coelacanth fish, right, and the lingula, which is found near the Tambalangamu Bay in Trincomalee. Then cockroach, dragonfly, lungfish, and not only that, there is a plant fern which is called as guinea otter, right, is also considered as a plant living fossil. So these are the living fossils, my dear children. Right then. So you are given with the examples, the figures for these organisms. So this is the coelacanth fish. As you can see by looking at the structure, my dear children, you can see that it's like a dinosaur, right? A dinosaur type of a fish. By looking at the face, you can see the structure of it, right? It's very weird. By observing the figure, you can say that the fish is somewhat weird, right? Okay, it's somewhat similar to the structures, similar to the organisms who were lived during the prehistoric era. So this is coelacanth. Then this is the lingula, right? The organism that is found on near the Tambalangamu Bay, right? Then the dragonfly. Structure of the dragonfly is also somewhat prehistoric. It's mainly because these organisms haven't evolved through the time. Then this is the plant fern or the tree fern, guinea otter. Then lungfish, right? Lungfish. Somewhat similar to the coelacanth, right? Somewhat similar to the coelacanth, The lungfish also considered as a living fossil. And the cockroach, my dear children. So I'll give you several interesting information about the cockroach. It is assumed that cockroach is the strongest organism who is ever to live in planet Earth. Why I'm saying that? It's because that cockroach has the ability to survive in any kind of a condition. Right? Cockroaches are very strong. I mean, their adaptation power is very strong. They can adapt to any kind of an environment quite quickly. Right? And the other interesting thing in cockroach is that if you remove the head of a cockroach, it will never die. I mean, like, it's going to die mainly because of lack of water and food. If you can find out a way to provide food and water by removing the head of a cockroach, then it will live as long as it's going to live. Okay. So cockroach is the strongest organism who is ever to live on the planet Earth. It's mainly because their adaptation power. The cockroach can even survive from a nuclear blast. Right? I'm not talking that if the nuclear blast is going to occur near a cockroach, then the cockroach is going to survive. I'm not going to tell like that. Right? But you know that during a nuclear blast, what will happen? The whole environment will be filled with toxic gases and radiations. Because of that, the animals and other types of organisms will die. But however, cockroaches will be able to survive. Right? So you know that when the time is going to pass by, there were several catastrophic incidents has happened in our Earth, like asteroid collisions, changes in climate, and so on. So cockroach have lived during that time period, facing those extinction level threats, right? So they have faced like 2 of these extinct level threats, even though the cockroach is still living. So that is why this organism is referred as the strongest organism. When that asteroid which came to wipe down all the dinosaurs, right? Cockroach was there. During the climatic changes of the mammoth, right? Or during the climatic changes to kill the mammoths, the cockroaches were there. And still the cockroaches are there, right? So they have survived from 2 catastrophic incidents, right? Extinct level incidents. I mean, like 80% of the organisms or the living things have been wiped out from the earth due to these 2 incidents, even though the cockroaches are there. Right? So cockroach is that kind of a strong organism. So this several pieces of information, somewhat interesting information about cockroach, my dear children. Right then. So these are the examples for living fossils then. Okay, living fossils. Right. Then the rocks formed in different stages on the earth were arranged in layers. These layers contain fossils of plants and animals. So the deposited rocks are at the bottom, and the older fossils can be seen there. So the rocks formed in different stages on earth were arranged in layers. These layers contain the fossils of plants and animals. The deposited rocks are at the bottom, and the older fossils can be seen there. Now, during the rock cycle, my dear children, during the formation of different types of rocks, sometimes organisms will trap inside these structures, right? And because of that, fossils may get created. So when the soil is going to cover, right, these rocks, when the soil is going to form, these rocks are going to cover by layer and layer. But however, my dear children, if you can observe, even if you can dig and observe the interior structures of these rocks, then sometimes, right, then sometimes you might find several fossils. Okay, so scientists are going to dig several layers of rocks in order to find out different fossils. So fossils can be found through the layers of rocks and stones as well. Okay, because we are discussing about millions of years back. We are discussing things which are things which were there within millions of years back. Okay, so when millions of years are going to pass by, you know that different layers of soil and rocks are going to appear. So in order to find out those fossils and other structures, scientists have to dig. Okay, they have to dig and excavate these things. So when digging and excavating those older rocks and different layers of rocks, scientists have a greater chance to find out different fossils which are trapped within the layers of rocks as well. Okay, then the next point, the rocks are deposited on the top of each other. The fossils in recent era can be seen on the top layer of the rocks. The study of fossils in the rock layers reveals about the plant and animals that lived in different periods of the earth. It gives an idea about bioevolution. So the next thing is that by observing these layers of rocks and layers of soil, my dear children, we can dig up several fossils. By observing these fossils, we can give the idea, or we can give the evidence of bioevolution, right? Biological evolution. And the other thing is that, my dear children, by looking at these fossils, we can say that, or we can reveal about the plants and animals who lived during prehistoric era. We can get the structures of the plants and animals who lived during that era. Actually, the structures of dinosaurs and the structures of other organisms, prehistoric organisms, were developed. Okay, those organisms, those structures, those body structures were developed based on those fossils. They might be correct or might be wrong. We don't know, because no human were there at the time that these organisms are going to roam here and there on the earth. So all of these things, all of these structures, all of these, especially with the dinosaurs, my dear children, right? All of these structures, all of these, like body structures, all of these shapes, pictures, those things are imaginary. Okay, by looking at the certain type of fossil and the skeletons, body structures, right? Body structures is not available, but by looking at the skeletal structures, scientists have been developed a certain kind of a figure, a picture. So that is the picture, the figure that we are observing right now. Okay, so we don't know whether it is correct or accurate. Okay, we don't know whether it is accurate or not. However, that's the best thing, or that's the best illustration that we can give by looking at the structures. Okay, so by looking at those fossils, my dear children, we can get an idea that these kinds of organisms were lived during that period of time. That's how even the dinosaurs, existence of dinosaurs, were presented to the world by looking at the fossils. Okay, so it is very important to give an idea about the distribution of plants and animals during the prehistoric era till now. Okay, and also by looking at those structures, we can give out a certain idea about the what? Bioevolution. Okay. So studying about fossils is really important to provide information for the bioevolution and to show the structures of different organisms who lived in the prehistoric era. Okay, right then. So I think you have heard that when looking at a certain fossil, by looking at a certain fossil, we won't be able to say how much older is it. Okay, we won't be able to we won't be able to say the time period of the certain fossil. In that case, my dear children, certain experiments are conducted by using carbon. Especially here it is given radioactive carbon. Radioactive means it's going to emit certain types of waves. Right? It's going to emit certain types of waves. Radioactive carbon. So radioactive carbon is carbon 614. That means the atomic number is 6 but the mass number is 14. Okay, radioactive carbon, atomic number is 6, same as the normal atomic number of carbon, but however the mass number is 14, not 12. Usually carbon can be observed as carbon 612, atomic number 6 and the mass number 12, but however there is radioactive carbon. Okay, radioactive carbon means it can emit certain types of waves. Okay, it can emit certain types of radiation. That is why it is called as radioactive carbon. So radioactive carbon can be used to determine the age of a certain type of a fossil or else a residue, right? A plant, or when you take an organic matter, a plant or else an animal, we can determine the time period or the age of a certain fossil by doing the carbon test. Here we use the radioactive carbon, carbon 614. So radioactive carbon, carbon 614 is an isotope of carbon element which is used to determine the age of fossils. So like I said, when you take a sample of fossil, right, to determine how much older is it, we can use, or the scientists are going to use, the carbon test experiment. Here the radioactive carbon, carbon 614 is being used. Okay, right. There is a certain time period which one certain atom of carbon 614 is going to disappear. Or it's going to change into other different kinds of forms. There is a certain time period. So within a certain body, right, there is a certain amount of carbon 614. There is a certain amount of carbon 614. By checking that amount and by checking the reduced amount, scientists can consider, or scientists can give out a estimated approximated value of the for the age of a certain fossil. Okay, my dear children. So carbon test is done. Carbon 614 is the element which is used. So the carbon test is done to determine the age of a certain fossil. So within that, my dear children, I'm going to wind up the third chapter related to the evolutionary process. So in the next chapter, my dear children, we'll be mainly focusing about the importance of evolution for the biodiversity. And we'll be discussing about the evolution process of horse, right? So the evolution process of horse is a factor, or it is especially we are studying about the horse because the evolution of horse is being totally studied through the fossil records. Okay, so it is a special kind of an organism that we can find out like almost all the fossil records. So therefore, the evolution of horse is especially discussed over here, right? However, my dear children, we'll be discussing those things within our next chapter. So within our next chapter, my dear children, we'll be focusing about the importance of evolutionary process to the biodiversity, and also the process of evolution of horse. Okay, so we'll be discussing those things within our next chapter.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.